what we know about the 15th to 17th century fencers and what training weapons they used and what examples remain and what restrictions to the art are the rules of the combat sport of the display, this fechtschul style fencing. And that's, you don't thrust to the face, swords are rebated, you can apply the slice and hit anywhere, but the only scoring thing is a bleeding wound to the head. And it's the highest bleeding wound to the head from above the ears and around the entire head, like that crown. So if there was an exchange and it was a double hit, there was no timing necessary for confusion. If there was a doubt, it was whichever one was higher. Example, if I'm fencing my friend and they strike me in the head at the same time I strike them in the head as we are winding and turning and burning, if their strike is higher than the one that I landed, i.e. a bleeding wound that's higher, then they win that exchange. There's no doubt. Simple clarity. But we can't do that in these days. So we do a best of 3 to 5 organic passes where the command of the art and their ability to enter and exit the engagement at will, essentially, shows us where their actual skill is, not the bleeding of an opponent, or rather the control necessary to just merely make an opponent lightly bleed from the head instead of crushing their skull or thrusting them. So, intention. The intention of training and learning about blossfechten is centered around just the fact that we can do what our ancestors did, right? Our HEMA, historical fencing, our martial arts ancestors. There's literally no reason not to try other than fear. And most often that sort of fear is based in falsehoods, mostly straw man arguments and logical fallacies. It is reasonably safe to train for fechtschul, low-level encounters with low to no gear. It's the execution of it that's actual intent is a minor wound that is troublesome. Is just the training mentality of control over speed, control over power, skill over victory, safety and your fellow over your victory, I should say. Like, this is a martial art that's application is not going to see the light of day unless you're doing trench warfare these days with a machete. So sword fighting is just not going to happen. So the only thing we have remaining is the traditions that we hold to. I like and I appreciate that our fencing tradition goes all the way back. This is how they trained it. They were trying to mimic how the Olympics were and how the pancration fights and wrestling matches were. The gladiatorial matches and the training for it. Like, this was all in their heads back then too. It was yet another resurgence societally of the fight. Just like what happened with MMA and all that. That kind of was the forefront of the resurgence that brought us historical fencing. All right, this is going to be heavily edited. I love it. But What we intend is to get as close to an original engagement as possible. And the best way to accomplish that is the same way that they did historically, and that was training in the fechtschul. These events were dry or wet, but they had a serious training intention behind them. The command of the measure, the boldness needed, the level of skill that had to be displayed,